Okay, today's daf we're going to be learning is Yevamot Daf Yud. Today's daf is sponsored by Elisha Gray, Purim Sameach to Rabbanit Michelle, all of the Hadran teachers and staff, and to my fellow students. Todah Rabbah for all of the joy and learning you bring to our lives. In the spirit of Queen Esther, perhaps this wonderful journey through Talmud together is our collective way of strengthening and perpetuating our faith and traditions. Purim Sameach to all. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to do a review of yesterday's daf. There was one thing I said incorrectly at the end of yesterday, so I need to clarify that for everyone. Now I see there's a problem. Why is it not here? Okay, wait, my shared documents. I have to fix that. Something went wrong here. I closed it accidentally. Okay, let's do slow start, but we will get there. Second. Okay, here goes. So yesterday, and the last thing that we talked about, let's just do a quick review of where we're up to and where we're going. What we had until now, the whole Aleha, I'm not going to go back there. We spent a long time on that Rasha, and why we have it, do we need it, etc. Then, or do we learn from somewhere else all the laws of our Mishnah? Then we went to this case of, we went to Levi. Levi says to Rebbe, why are there only 15 cases in the Mishnah? There really should be 16. What's the 16th case? Well, the 16th case is Imo Anusat Aviv. Now, what Levi says is if a woman gets raped by her, now I want to clarify, okay, Imo Anusat Aviv, when we say rape, maybe even rape isn't the proper term. Okay, I know the word rape sounds very harsh, but really what it means is someone not married had a child, okay? It's really out of wedlock. That's really what the case is, because all these cases are just trying to establish all sorts of relationships. Now, if someone wasn't married to someone, right, the real erva of a man to his father's wife is his father's wife, okay? Either it's his mother, actually, or it's his father's wife. So now, a father's wife, if a father has a child out of marriage with someone, out of wedlock, that's not his father's wife. So there's a machloket about Imo Anusat Aviv, whether she exempts the tzarot or not, okay? Whether if, again, we had this case, right? So Yaakov has a child with a woman out of marriage, ends up with a son. That son is actually sons for Yibum with Yaakov's regular children. So if the whole question is, if the woman, right, if the wife of this, right, if, one second, right, if Imo Anusat Aviv, right, his mother were to fall to Yibum to him, which they can't get married, would that exempt the tzara or not? Would that be part of this Mishnah or not? And that's a machloket Rabbi Yehuda and Levi. Why is that a machloket Rabbi Yehuda and Levi? Because it's a real machloket between them, because the mother, the question is, obviously he can't marry, it's his mother. But the question is, what about his brothers? Is there a case of Yibum, theoretically, where, is there a real case where the brother could have been married and he could have fallen to Yibum to her? Could she have ever married Reuven? If she couldn't have ever married him in the first place, then this wouldn't be a case that belongs in our Mishnah. And we'll see that later. That really belongs in the next Mishnah. If none of the brothers can ever marry, well, then that's not the case. Our case is always, you can't marry this particular brother, but you could have married another brother and you could have fallen to Yibum to someone who was a forbidden relationship. If you hold like Rabbi Yehuda holds anyone who your father had had a relationship, a sexual relationship with, Anusat Aviv is going to be forbidden to all of his sons. None of Yaakov's sons can ever have a relationship with a woman. It's erva, any woman that he slept with. So now that case could never be in our Mishnah if you hold that way. But if you hold like Rabbi Yehuda, that theoretically the brothers could have, then this would be a classic case in our Mishnah. And that's what Levi says. This belongs in our Mishnah, to which we said, Rebbe says to him, you have no brain in your head. What are you talking about? That clearly can't be, because it's a topic of machloket. We don't have machloket. So that's what we're up to in the Gemara, which is, what do you mean we don't have machloket, right? We said in one case we had a machloket here, we had a machloket there, we rejected all those. But now we're up to this thing about Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia says that with all the cases of the Mishnah, you can always have a case of asura lezeh muteret lezeh, asura lezeh muteret lezeh, v'yivimta she'echotah choletzet o mikabem. Okay, what does that mean? That's a very, I could say that very quickly, but the question is, what does it mean? And this was the basic case. We had 4 brothers married to 2 sisters. And right, that's achotah she'yivimta, where we have 2 sisters who fall to yibum to the same guys. And then we said, if, right, you could have a situation, in this case, it's a situation where, right, they can each do chalitza, right? They can't do yibum, okay? In here it says chotzot v'lo mityabot, right? In this case, this is the background case, neither of them can do yibum because both have zika to each of the brothers, and that's a problem. But in all the cases of our Mishnah, we could find a case where asura lezeh muteret lezeh, if, for example, they fall to yibum to their mother, right? She's the mother-in-law. She falls to yibum to the son-in-law. If, right, we had the case where 2 sisters married 2 brothers. They each had daughters. The daughters married the other 2 brothers. And then each of them only has zika to one of them. And then you could have a case where the brother that's forbidden to one is permitted to the other. That was the whole case, where then both of them could actually do yibum. And then we had a whole discussion. Is that in all the cases of the Mishnah? What about the first 6? It doesn't really relate to Bito. You can't really have a case. And then we said, well, maybe you could have a case of that. You could have it if it was out of wedlock again, this onus case. Or we then said, you could have all those. Remember, Rav Yehuda said it was Mechamot Tov Elach. Then we had, who was the second one? Abaye said that you could have that case of Bito, Me'onsin, but you can't have, what case is not going to be there? Achiv shelo ba'al ha'olam. To them, Rav Safra said, no, I'm going to explain it with all 15 cases, only according to Rabbi Shimon. Okay, so let's go through Rabbi Shimon again. This meit nolav yibem, as our Gemara starts off with, that's the sima. So let's just talk about this case one more time, and I'll explain one minor thing I messed up at the very end. So Yaakov and Leah are married. They have 4 children, okay, because we're going to get to 6 brothers ultimately, but right now we have 4 brothers. 2 of them marry women, Tamar and Yael. Now, when Reuven dies, the first husband, now Tamar, before she does yibum with the next brother, a new brother is born. That brother is forbidden to her right now, okay? At this point is forbidden to her because that's nolad, right? Was born after Reuven died and before she did yibum. Now, according to Rabbi Shimon, though, what's going to happen is like this. Okay, so let's keep going. So Yisachar is actually going to be forbidden to her. Okay, now she does yibum with Levi, and then in the meantime, Zvulun is born. Now here's the key. Zvulun, let's talk about Zvulun's relationship to Reuven. Zvulun is also achiv shelo ba'al ha'olam, right? Because compared to Reuven, which was Tamar's first husband. However, when she's now married to Levi, Zvulun is already born before Levi dies, in which case that's the chiddush of Rabbi Shimon. Zvulun is not going to be forbidden to Tamar now because while she's married to her new husband that she did yibum with Levi, Zvulun is born and he is around, okay? So then we're now going to have Shimon. Shimon dies, and now, oh no, did I just say this wrong? I said it wrong again. How did I get messed up? Something is wrong. My mistake. 1 minute. Shimon. Oh no, something went wrong here. Okay, let's try again. I don't know why. In the Hebrew, I explained it without a problem both times. Somehow here I got confused. Okay, let's try again. They're married. Reuven. Then Yisachar is born. So Tamar is forbidden to Yisachar, but now she marries Levi. Oh, that's the issue. Sorry, I said it wrong. Now that she married Levi, Yisachar is already around. And then Shimon dies. And after Shimon dies, Zvulun is born. Okay? So now, before Yael does Yibum. So Yael is going to be prohibited to Zvulun. Okay? And then, because Zvulun was born later, no, I don't even know what I said a minute ago. I'm really sorry that I keep getting confused with this, but let's just try again. Because now, when Tamar married Levi, Zvulun was born. So now, right, Tamar is, maybe I said this right, Tamar can marry Zvulun because, right, she could do Yibum with Zvulun because when she, even though compared to Reuven, Zvulun was a brother that hadn't come to the world yet, but when it comes to her marriage with Levi, and Levi now died, this is the Chiddush to Rabbi Shimon. Zvulun is no longer to her ach shelo haya ba'olamo, a brother that was never born, because even though in her relationship to Reuven, Zvulun hadn't been alive yet, but within her relationship to Levi, Zvulun was alive and well before Levi died. So therefore, Zvulun, even though he's very young and he wasn't alive when Reuven, he was alive when Levi died. But Shimon, right, because Zvulun was born then, Yael, right? In other words, Shimon died, and then Zvulun was born in between the time that Yael, that's the whole thing. Because he was born in between the time that Shimon died and Yael did Yibum, that's this whole mate nolad v'yibem. If he was born in between the death and the Yibum, Yael will be forever forbidden to Zvulun. But Yisachar was around when Shimon was married to her, before Shimon died. So Yisachar is not a problem at all to Yael. Okay, so that's the case of Rav Safra. I hope it was clear now. No, sorry if I got a little bit confused. Okay, now, maybe it just makes you feel better that you also get confused. So now, what's the whole point of this? Again, it's a super, super complicated case. Just to tell you very simply, that if we read Rabbi Chia into the Mishnah, Rabbi Chia came to describe our Mishnah and said all the 15 cases in the Mishnah, those rules apply to those 15 cases, right? What rules? Asura lezeh muteret lezeh, asura lezeh muteret lezeh, v'yivim tashi, right? V'achotashi yivim tach choleseh v'lo mityabemet. And Rav Safra says we can even find that with all 15 cases, and even in Eshet Achiv shelo haya ba'olamo, only according to Rabbi Shimon, though. Now, what were we saying? The Mishnah has to be when the Mishnah is only talking about cases of machlokot, that are not machlokot, that are not debatable points. This case can only be found if it's only according to Rabbi Shimon. Because again, according to the rabbis, Yisachar and Zvulun were not born when Reuven died, and therefore they're forever forbidden to Tamar. Even though she married Levi, we don't care that Zvulun was alive when Levi was married to her. She'll be forever forbidden to both of them. So that's a machloket. So we have a very simple answer to this question. Ella l'Rebbe hane klali leitle. Why are you asking a question on our Mishnah from what Rabbi Chia said about our Mishnah? Rabbi Chia was the one who said these 15 cases, asura lezeh muteret lezeh, asura lezeh muteret lezeh, chodai yishivim tacholet zedom tebemet. That's Rabbi Chia's opinion. Rebbe, who put together our Mishnah, never said that. So why are you saying our Mishnah is dealing with a case that's a machloket, according to Rav Safra? That's not our Mishnah. That's Rabbi Chia's interpretation of our Mishnah. And with that, we answer the question very simply, right? A very complicated question with a very simple answer, almost saying what kind of even a question was this? And that's why I think it was a little complicated to know what was the question, because it wasn't the Mishnah. It was Rabbi Chia on our Mishnah. So until now, what we've done is we took Levi. Levi said, why aren't there 16 cases? You should also have another case. Now, we don't even know what case he added. The Gemara told us, right? The Gemara then said, "My da'atech, what did you think?" Right? When all we know is Levi said there should be 16 cases, and Rebbe said, you have no brains in your head, right? Or he said, this guy has no brains in his head. The Gemara explained, what was he thinking, Rebbe, when he said that? Well, what he must have been saying is, you thought to add Imon Usat Aviv, and that can't be because that's a machloket. And then we tried to question that from 3 different things. Is it really true there's no machloket? And we answered, yeah, really, there's no machloket. And even though you brought this last one of Rav Safra and Rabbi Chia and the 15 case and how all these cases have this case, and that also is an issue for machloket, don't worry, that's not actually our Mishnah. That's someone commenting on the Mishnah, but don't worry about that. Now we're going to actually say, we're going to give 2 other explanations for why Rebbe was upset with Levi, 2 alternatives. We don't really know why Rebbe thought that Levi shouldn't have said 16 cases. Our suggestion was that he thought it was Imon Usat Aviv, which is a machloket, because there's a debate about whether the tzara of this person would be permitted or not. Rav Ada Karchina, Kamed Rav Kahana, Amar Mishmei Rava, Lo'olam, Ile LeRebbe Hane Klale. And this answer is going to kind of relate to what we just said. When Rabbi Chia said, for all these cases, blah, 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 where you could have 4 brothers, 2 sisters, and theoretically the sisters could actually do yibum with each of the brothers, even though really normally they can't because they're both supposed to marry each brother, and that's all a problem, right? They can't do yibum if they have a connection to both two sisters at the same time because one person can't marry two sisters. So comes this Rav Ada Karchina and he says, really, Rebbe holds like Rabbi Chia. Okay, which means all these cases you could have that. And Imo Anus. Now, what's the issue then? So why then, if he has them, then by the way, what do you see here? You could have cases of machloket, okay? So why did he reject Levi then? Not because these are issues that are machloket, right? Imo Anusat Aviv is a machloket. But the reason he rejected it is for the following reason. Imo Anusat Aviv, it's still he was against him on Imo Anusat Aviv, according to this interpretation, but because of what Rabbi Chia said. That we have to find a case in all these 15 or maybe 16 cases where we have a situation where where we have four brothers, two sisters, the two sisters fall to Yibum to two brothers, and they can actually each do Yibum. That's what we have to find. And we're not going to find that in the case of Imo Anusat Aviv, okay? Even according to Rabbi Yehuda, okay? So now, this is what he says. Hachi ka'amrle. There's, and we didn't really read Rabbi Chia this way, but Rabbi Chia is really saying two things. He's saying we could have a case where asura lezeh muteret lezeh, asura lezeh muteret lezeh, right? One wife can't marry one yabam, and the other wife can't marry the other yabam. And we could have a situation where two people fall, right? And they can each marry the other. And achota she'ivim tacho, let's have a lo mikabem. And then the point is, two sisters could actually do chalitza or yibum if they wanted. So comes and he splits this into two, really. He's going to say, you could find it true about one of the things Rabbi Chia said, but betarte lo mishkachala. You can't find it in both. We're going to say basically, okay, and I'll show you now on the screen. Let me share the presentation. Sorry, that's yesterday's. Issues today with my share screen application. So now we start with Yevamot 10's presentation. So now we have a woman, we have Imo Anusat Aviv, okay? So again, Yaakov has two sons, Reuven and Shimon. He then has relations with Yael and Ephrat outside of a marriage. They each give birth to Yehuda and Levi, okay, Levi and Yehuda. Yael marries Shimon, Ephrat marries Reuven, right? So each of the women he had this relationship with outside of marriage married his two sons, basically, right? Then Reuven and Shimon die, and right, we're going to have Yael. Now this is the case we're going to have Ishte Nochriot Anas, okay? If he had this relationship with two women that weren't related, see, Ephrat and Yael are different colors. So now it's very simple. Yael can't be in a relationship with Levi, and Ephrat can't be in a relationship with Yehuda because they're the mom. Okay, that for sure they can't. Therefore, asura lezeh muteret lezeh. Okay, you could have this case. Mishkachala. You could have Yael is permitted to Yehuda and Ephrat is permitted to Levi. That works, right? Each one is prohibited to one, and therefore each one can marry the other. But you can't have. Notice here, Yael and Ephrat are not sisters. Now remember what Rabbi Chia said. He said two things. He said you could have a case where two women fall to Yibum from two brothers to the other two brothers, and each one can marry the other. That can happen only if they're not, in this case, only if they're not sisters. But Yaakov shte achayot anas, okay? So that's the first case the Gemara says, okay? I kind of gave the basic case first. I read it a little out of order in the Gemara here in the presentation. But if it was shte achayot, if you have Yaakov who had a relationship out of marriage with two sisters, now what's important to understand here is if he had this relationship with two sisters, you could have a case where both of them fall to Yibum to two brothers, but you're not going to have a case where asura lezeh muteret lezeh, neither is going to be able to do Yibum. So here, what happens? Again, the same thing. He has two wives, Ephrat and Yael, okay, but there's not wives, sorry. Two relationships outside of marriage. They're sisters. So he's got two sons of his own, legitimate sons, right? Then we have Yael as a child Levi and Ephrat as a child Yehuda with him. Now what happens? Then each of them marry his other two sons. And then we're going to have Reuven dies, Shimon dies. And now both of them are prohibited because, right? Because what happens? They're both equally related to Yehuda, right? They're, okay, now here's the key, okay? They are both equally forbidden to Levi and Yehuda. Why? Yael can be with Levi because that's her son. Ephrath can't be with Yehuda because that's her son. Or for him, it's the mother. But it's also their mother's sister, right? Now, your mother's sister, Achot Imo, is Erva also. So Yehuda not only can't marry his mother, right? Do even with his mother, he also can't do it with the other mother, okay? The other woman, because that's his aunt. So you can't have a case of this. So that's why, okay? So again, let's read it inside. If Yaakov Chayot Anas, you could have a Chotashi Yibimta, you could have a case of that, but you could have a case where theoretically both of them fell to Yibum to the two brothers, but but you can't have a case where one can marry one of them and one can marry the other because they're all going to be aunts to each other, right? So they're either the aunt or they're the mother. Can't happen. And if it was two random women that he had a relationship with and child with, you could have a case where one can marry one and one can marry the other, that's fine, but it won't be but it won't be sisters. And that was the case that Rabbi Chia said. So basically, according to the second explanation, Rebbe does hold like Rabbi Chia. He views the Mishnah as including all those. That's true. All these 15 cases, this is true about them. Etc. And therefore, it says to Levi, Imon Usataviv doesn't belong here. You want to add that case? You can't have a case of sisters that could end up because it's always going to be their aunt as well. That's the simplest way to say it. Okay, so now, okay, I see you're asking, Debbie, and you're reminding me that I wanted to relate to this issue, which is, I want you to understand that these cases are purely theoretical entirely, okay? Right? The fact that they'll be doing Yibum with a brother that wasn't born yet and another brother that wasn't born yet. And these cases are very theoretical, okay? The fact that a man would end up in a relationship out of marriage with two women that are sisters, they never really thought that these cases were realistic. They were trying to talk about different possibilities to sort of talk about the halacha and where it would apply. Like any legal book, a legal textbook, right? We'll talk about all sorts of random cases to get to the general principle, or at least a legal book like the Gemara works that way. And we see this in many cases. So these cases, I want you to understand, are not practical for the most part. Very unlikely these things would happen. Okay, so just so you'll be aware, and I'll tell you the biggest proof for that. There's sources that seem very clear in the Gemara that they weren't into polygamy. Okay, they weren't, even though, yes, people could do it. And Takanat Rabbeinu Gershom many years later said people can't do this anymore, but it was very rare and they frowned upon it. Okay, you'll see soon that they say, I think we saw it already, the chalitza is not even, the chalitza is preferable, even though Yibum is fulfilling the mitzvah of the Torah, but they didn't want it because they didn't want people with two wives. Didn't like that whole thing. So all these cases are based on two wives and two, it's very unlikely that any of these scenarios would actually happen. Just so you know, these aren't realistic. This is a pure mind game, okay, to try to get to the theory around this. Okay, now, yes, I also have a friend who have two sisters married to two brothers. That's likely, but that they have other wives and that they this and that they, right, all that is much more unlikely. Okay, Rav Ashi Amar, Le'olam leitle Rebbe Hane Klali. Third possibility is to Rebbe why he was so upset with Levi. He doesn't have these principles of Rabbi Chia. And Beplugta Kamairi, and he has no problem mentioning things that are sources of debate, meaning rejecting answer number one, rejecting answer number two. Now we're going to give a different explanation of Rebbe and Levi. So why was he so upset with Levi? This is what he said to him. My time why weren't you more careful about how you read the Mishnah? Our Mishnah clearly follows the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Now, what was Rabbi Yehuda's opinion? Right? He forbade, that was the whole chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda. Anyone, right, if the father had a relationship with some other woman outside of marriage, all the sons are equally prohibited. Now, how do we know this? Dikatani, how do we know the Mishnah follows his opinion? And then obviously then Anusat Aviv should not be in this first Mishnah because you'll see. The first Mishnah, we know already, is if a woman, right, the basic premise of all the cases in the first Mishnah is that the woman could marry one of his brothers and did, then ends up in Yibum to him, and he's erva for her. right? That's the premise. But the premise is that she was allowed to marry his brothers. Now, if you hold like Rabbi Yehuda, and we'll go on a minute and you'll see, the next Mishnah says, Shesh arayot chamurot me'em. There's 6 arayot that are more stringent than these. We're going to explain this Mishnah much more in detail when we get there, so no worries. Okay, we're going to explain it minorly today. What this basically means in a very simple way, even though we'll explain it a little bit better when we get there, there's 6 women who you could never have the scenario we had in the first Mishnah. Why? Because they're forbidden to marry any of his brothers. They could never have married the brother in the first place because, okay, like let's say, Imo, okay? Imo, your mother, now remember, Yevamot is by the father. So they all share the same father. And let's go to Eshet Aviv. That's the easiest case. That's the next one. His father's wife. The father's wife is forbidden to him in the exact same way. All of his brothers through his father are forbidden to the father's wife. So you could never have a scenario, at least it was permitted, where the brother married this woman, because this woman was his father's wife, forbidden to all the brothers equally. We need a case in all the 15 cases where she could have married the brother, but it was erva, right, to him, not to the brother, but to him, yes. So now we're going to say, it says in that Mishnah, Imo, ve'eshet aviv, achot aviv, etc. It gives 6 cases. Now it says mother and father's wife. My Imo, if you're going to say mother is literally mother, ilim anisuat aviv, hainu eshet aviv. His mother is also his father's wife. You don't need to list those as 2 separate cases. It must be then, what is Imo? Elalav anusat aviv. Imo must be anusat aviv, and it must be Rabbi Yehuda, who basically says anusat aviv is forbidden to all the brothers equally, which means you could never have a scenario, and that's why it's in Mishnah. That's why it's in the second Mishnah, not the first Mishnah. Vikatane, and then it says about this, which basically means since they can't marry the brothers, they can only marry other people. They can't marry the brothers. I'm not going to get into what that means that they can marry others and what. I'll get to that when we get to the Mishnah. But the main point is they clearly can't marry the brothers. And if it means anusat aviv, the only one who thinks that anusat aviv can't marry the brothers, now basically the rabbis think that if the man had a relationship with some other woman outside of marriage, the son born from that obviously can't marry his mother, but can't have a relationship with his mother, but the other brothers can, because the father was never married. Only Eshet Aviv is a problem, but not someone he had a sexual relationship with. Okay, so that's the big debate here. So now, if we put Anusat Aviv in that other Mishnah, not our Mishnah, you're obviously holding by Rabbi Yehuda. Man Shamat Leidi Luz Haisfara, who has this, right? Who holds this way? Rabbi Yehuda, Ta'asar Ba'anusat Aviv. Mishum Hachi Lo Tanele, and that's why it's not in the Mishnah. So Amarle Ravina le Ravashi. Ravina tries to reject Ravashi's interpretation. This is very simply saying, our Mishnah holds in as Levi. Why did you want to add Imo Anusat Aviv? It doesn't belong in the first Mishnah. You're wrong. Because our Mishnayot all go according to Rabbi Yehuda, and that's because Imo and Eshet Aviv are the same thing. Imo must mean Anusat, right? His mother, who's Anusat Aviv, who had a relationship outside of marriage with the father, in which case, that's Rabbi Yehuda, in which case our Mishnah is obviously Rabbi Yehuda, in which case Imo Anusat Aviv doesn't belong in our Mishnah. So that's why he was upset with Levi. So Ravina says to Ravashi, wait a minute. Rabbi Yehuda nami mishkachala di'avar v'nasif. You could have a case. What if one of the brothers, they're not supposed to marry the mother, but let's say the woman that their father had a relationship with, let's say they did. Let's say avar v'nasif. They did it anyway. Okay? So now you're opening up a Pandora's box, right? And comes the Gemara and says, Di'ilo katani. The Mishnah is not talking about cases of a forbidden relationship where someone went ahead and did it anyway and caused this yibum, right? And married Shimon, right? Remember, Reuven has a brother, Shimon. Reuven was born from this out of marriage relationship. Shimon was born from the regular relationship of, Yaakov and his wife. And Shimon marries the either the rape victim or however you call it, the woman out of wedlock. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he's not allowed to, but let's say he does anyway. And then she'll fall to Yibum to Reuven. And then it would be like the first Mishnah. So comes the Gemara and says, Di'ilo katani. The Mishnah wasn't talking about cases that could never, ever happen. Okay, that's, that are forbidden. No. So Amarle Ravashi the Rav Kahana. Now Ravashi says, below di'i nami mishkachala. We could have a case of, if without saying di'i, you could have another case. Yaakov anas kalato, v'holim mimenu ben. Let's go back to our pictures. Okay, now, sorry. taking my computer a little while. Okay. Now, next case. So Yaakov has a relationship with his daughter-in-law. Okay, his daughter, he has a son, Reuven. He has a daughter-in-law, Dinah, and also Shula. And he ends up in a relationship with Shula. Okay, now, they have a child named David. Okay, David. Now, what happens if Reuven dies? What happens is now David is related to, actually, they should have been the same color. There's a mistake here. David should have been a shade of Reuven. They're both brothers because they both share the same father. Yaakov had a child outside of marriage named David, a child inside marriage named Reuven. Okay. Now, so Yaakov had a relationship. Now, this is a forbidden relationship also. He can't have a relationship with his kalato, okay, Shula. But if Reuven died without children and she falls to Yibum, right? Shula falls to her son. Then also, I see the name should be switched. Okay, Shula is usually the tzara here. Okay, it's a bit of a mistake here. But anyway, if, right, sorry, that's the end of the case. Since the rape, the woman who was raped and had the son or had the son out of marriage is prohibited, also the other one will be prohibited. So now, this is a little bit similar to the other case because it's again a forbidden relationship, but it's not the relationship. There, the forbidden relationship was with Reuven, was with the one who ended up causing the Yibum situation. This is something that predated that. So basically, right, because Reuven was allowed to be married to Shula and Dinah, right? He didn't have an issue. It was later, Yaakov had a relationship. So now we say like this. So you could have mentioned that case. So now they say, right, so again, let's read it inside. Below di'inami mishkachal, I could come up with the case. Yaakov anas kalatovo limimenu ben. He has a son. Umei Reuven below banim. And then the legit son who was married to the same woman that Yaakov had a relationship with, dies without children, and then she falls Yibum to her son. We could have added that case as well, to which they says, even though this wasn't a forbidden relationship that caused the Yibum, this was a forbidden relationship, and David is an illegitimate son, and therefore we're not going to talk about illegitimate children because, right, he's a mamzer because it was from a forbidden relationship of Yaakov with his daughter-in-law. So clearly that's an illegitimate relationship, and we're not talking about cases like that. Okay, and therefore he rejects this possibility that you could have an Usat Aviv in the Mishnah somehow. Okay. So that was three interpretations to Rebbe. Now we come up to Levi. What's Levi's reaction to what Rebbe says? Does he go with Rebbe or does he come up with his own? Well, he stuck to his guns and he said, I believe that really there are 16 cases, despite what Rebbe said. Detane Levi, as Levi says in Breita, Imo, okay, again, this Imo Anusat Aviv, okay, the woman who had a relationship outside of marriage and ends up falls even to his mother. Poteret, pa'amim poteret sarata, pa'amim ein poteret sarata. He says, you know what? There's a split. Yes, I agree that the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. But even within that, I'm going to show you that there's a split. That case can appear in both Mishnayot. There could be a case where she exempts her tzara, her second wife. There could be a case where she doesn't exempt her tzara. So let's see. Ketzad, hayta imo nisuat aviv, v'niset la'achiv me'aviv v'met, zoi imo she'ein poteret tzarata. Okay, this is a case where the woman marries, right? The woman's married to the father, and then she marries his brother. Okay, now, she can't marry his brother. Remember, there wasn't Yibum here. It's forbidden. Let's say she does. Now, if she does, now what we're going to see here is Levi clearly isn't concerned with this case of Di'i. He has no problem adding cases against Rebbe that could only happen from a forbidden relationship. Now we're going to learn something else, which is if you marry someone that's forbidden by karet, the severe, okay, like your brother's wife, you can't marry. If you do, we say en kiddushin tofsi. The marriage is not a marriage. It's viewed not as marriage. So let's figure that out. If she's not really married to him, let's say she marries her brother. I said it wrong. She's married to the brother of the son. Okay, there's Yaakov. He was married to Rachel. He had a son, Reuven. I didn't put a chart because it's pretty simple. She marries Shimon, Reuven's brother. Okay, so she marries his brother, and then she falls to Yibum to Reuven, and she was his father's wife. It's pretty basic, right? You can't marry your father's wife. Now, in this case, she couldn't marry Shimon either. It was forbidden to her, and there was no marriage really. So if she had a tzara, she doesn't exempt her because it was as if there was no marriage. Kiddush and Kiddushin Tofsim. Okay, the Kiddushin doesn't work. So if Imo is Nisuat Aviv and Niseit Lachiv and she married Shimon, which is not allowed to, Me'aviv, right, and as the brother from his father, which was Shimon, Vamet, and then her husband died and she falls to Reuben, Zoe Imo she'en poteret sarata, because she was never really married to Shimon. But Haita Imo Anusat Aviv, in other words, we're going to split between a mother and a mother that was from outside of marriage. If the mother was Anusat Aviv, meaning had a child outside of marriage, V'niseit la'achiv me'aviv, and then married the brother, okay, right, who shared the same father, but that's the whole machloket, Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis. And even Rabbi Yehuda forbids, it's only Isur Lav, it's not Karet. If it's Lav, Kiddushin or Tofsim, that marriage would be a legitimate marriage. Zoe Moshe Poteret Sarata. This is different from what we said before. Now, according to Levi, that will exempt her tzara because she was only forbidden to Shimon by an Isur Lav. If she did it anyway, and why is this different from Rebbe? Because Levi says we could put in the Mishnah cases where someone did something Isur. She wasn't allowed to marry Shimon. But if she did, it would actually work because it's only Isur Lav. And Isur Lav, if it's just a don't do it, but it's not karet, the marriage is actually valid. So if that's the case, since the marriage was valid, she would be poteret sarata. And that would be a 16th case. So he basically thinks that Imo Nusat Aviv belongs in the Mishnah. Imo, regular mother, belongs in the second Mishnah, as we just explained. But Imo Nusat Aviv belongs there because if they did it Isur and he married her, she would have married the brother, which is forbidden. But if she would do it, the marriage would be valid. Then you would have a case where she would be poteret sarata. She'd fall to Reuben, who's her son. She can't marry him. It would be a case. Okay, so that's another case. Now, Amalei Rish Lakish LeRabbi Yochanan. LeLevi de'amar di'inami katani. So now comes, okay, this is based on another machloket, which we're going to see only in a minute. The order in the Gemara is a little bit strange here. But Rish Lakish says to Rabbi Yochanan, wait a minute. If you're already adding cases that are forbidden relationships, well, you should add this case as well. Okay? What case? So choletz liyivimto, v'chazar v'kitsha. Okay, we have three brothers married, right? One's married to a woman, he dies. Then the second brother does chalitza with the wife. Now, once you do chalitza, she's now forbidden to all the brothers. Okay, that's a law. Okay, she's forbidden. Now, what happens? She can't marry him. She can't marry the other brothers. This is the big machloket, Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. For what reason? So she clearly can't marry Shimon anymore because he did chalitza. Now in chalitza, this is appropriate for a perm. Says in the Torah, you say kacha yaseh la'ish, just like in the Megillah, asher lo yivneh et beit achiv, who won't build his brother's house. Now it should say asher lo bana, who didn't build his brother's house, but it doesn't say that. It says it asher lo yivneh, as if it's future. The rabbis learned from here. There's a lo taseh, just a lo taseh. Remember, we just distinguished lo taseh and karet. There's a lo taseh for Shimon to marry Dana right now. Okay. Once he does chalitza, he's not allowed to marry her anymore. They don't go back to the eshet ach that was originally upon him because of Yibum. Okay. But what's the status of other brothers? That's a machloket Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Okay. One thinks the other brothers are also a lo taseh, and one thinks the other brothers had nothing to do with this Yibum or chalitza. They didn't get involved. So they go back to being an eshet ach, which is karet. That's going to make it a big difference, whether it's karet or not. We'll see in a minute. So Rish Lakish says to Rabbi Yochanan, LeLevi de'amar di'inami katane, litne, if you're going to use this case of di'i and a forbidden relationship, why don't we use this case of choletz liyivimto? And what if Shimon goes and marries her anyway? He does chalitza first, and then he marries her. Now, he's not allowed to. It's a lo taseh. But what do we say? Lo taseh, the marriage is valid because it's only a lo taseh. So if he dies b'li banim, migo di'i asura. Now what happens? Dana now is supposed to marry Levi, but she can't because he reverted back to being eshet ach from Reuven. So now, since she's forbidden to Levi, also tsaratanami asura, she's going to permit shula. So why isn't that mentioned? If Levi already mentions all sorts of cases, why wouldn't he mention this one as well? So the answer the Gemara gives is, Lefisha Amar Le, Rabbi Yochanan answers, Lefisha Eina b'tzarat tzara. Well, since she's not allowed to do Yibum in Levi, you can never have the second stage. Remember, she can't marry Levi, she can't marry Yehuda. The tzarat tzara was always a case where there was another brother that they were able to do Yibum with. In this case, no one could do Yibum. You can never get to tzarat tzara, and that's why. To which the Gemara says, wait a minute. If you're going to say Amar Le, V'le Male, why didn't you just say Chai ve'lavim hi? Rabbi Yochanan, you yourself think that Levi is the same status as Shimon. Why don't you just say it's only Chai ve'lavim? I mean, let's say she married him anyway. Chai ve'lavim b'nei chalitza v'yibum ninu. If she's only forbidden to Levi because of lo yivneh, and then she falls him to yibum again, she would have to do yibum and chalitza according to you, because you think lo yivneh applies to all the brothers as well. And therefore, why don't you just say that? To which Rabbi Yochanan says, well, lidvarav ka'amrle. I was talking according to your logic. You think the brothers are karet, and that's why I gave a different answer. But yeah, you're right. According to me, it would be the same. So how does it work? Lididi chai ve'lavim him, chai ve'lavim b'nei chalitza v'yibum ninu. I think you could have a case like this, and it would be in the Mishnah, but I was talking according to you. Ela lididcha chai ve'kritu ninu lefi she'ena b'tzarat tzara. For you, it's karet, and because, right, for you, so you think it's karet, therefore it's not b'tzarat tzara. So now let's just read the machloket and read the reasons for the machloket, and then we'll stop here. Itmar hacholetz li'yivin tov chazar v'kitsha. If you had this case, he did chalitza and then he marries her. Amar Rish Lakish, this is just review from what I just said. Hu ein chayav, and I charted it on the sheet also. Hu ein chayav ala chalutza karet, hachim chayavim ala chalutza karet. He doesn't have chayav karet anymore. It's just lo yivneh, and therefore he can't ever marry her. But isur lav, the brothers revert back to being eshet achiv, and it's a sur. Al hatzara, what about the tzara? Ben hu, ben achim chayavim ala tzara karet. At this point, the tzara, it's karet for everybody. She goes back to being eshet for all of them. For Rabbi Yochanan Amal, sorry, did I say enu chayav karet? Achim chayav. Sorry, right? Who in right? So for him, it's not karet. For the brothers, it's karet. That's what I said. Now, Rabbi Yochanan Amal, ben hu ben achim enam chayavim lo al chalutza karet v'lo al atzara karet. Right? He and the brothers, none of them have karet. My time of Rish Lakish. So now let's get their logic. Amar Krasha lo yivneh, kevan shelo bana shuv lo yivneh. But who's that on? Ew. He de lo kaibel lo yivneh. Who de kaibel lo yivneh? It's only the one who did the chalitza. It's all on him, the lo yivneh. Aval achiv kedekame kame. They had nothing to do with anything. They revert back to being esherach. Va'ala didau de kaibel lo yivneh. And it's only on her, and therefore hatzara kedekame kame. Again, the tzara didn't have anything to do with this either. She reverts back to esherach. She can't marry any of the brothers. But Rabbi Yochanan, what are you talking about? Just because Shimon chose Dana and they did chalitza together, that doesn't remove Levi and Shula from the picture. Levi could have done Yibum or chalitza. He could have done it with Shula and Dana, and the other brother could have done it with Shula and Dana. They were all basically the same. So what that one of them did chalitza? Hashta kayale bekaret. Right, and you're going to say they go back to being karet. That makes no sense. They were each just messengers of the other. That means whatever's going to be true for Shimon and Dana is now true for everybody else in the picture. So if they end up in this new thing, which is they did chalitza, so now they have this issue of lo yivneh, and they don't go back to being esherah, then it's true for all the brothers and all the wives. Okay, so these are two different viewpoints. We're going to talk a little bit more about this machloka tomorrow. We're going to see, we'll stop here. We'll see Rabbi Yochanan's question, Rish Lakish, etc. Anyway, I've got to go hear Megillah, so I'm going to stop here, and we will pick up from here tomorrow. Okay, have a great day, everyone. Purim Sameach. Okay.
Chag Sameach.
Thank you. These are one of the hardest to pim, just so you know, okay? This
Thank you, because it's hard.
Okay, it'll get easier.
Bye.
Also, as you go through the cases more. Okay, I got to run to shul. Bye.
Bye.